Hello, this is Academic Tech Talk number 4. Evan Peterson, your academic technologist from the College of Biological Sciences and this RLT department. So today is going to be a little bit of a departure from our typical topics of Canvas and computer-related things, and we're going to talk about something else that's relevant, especially this time of year, and that's stress. And this time of year, faculty, I know that you're dealing with creating finals, grading papers, maybe dealing with academic dishonesty or something of that nature. And the rest of the world is pressing in with news and with pandemic news and all sorts of different things. And so it was actually Kellyanne's idea. It's like, how about you talk to someone about stress and see what instructors can do about their stress levels. And I just met for the first time today, actually, Mariann Johnson from the Center of Spirituality and Healing. And she deals with this sort of thing a lot. I looked at her resume, and she's had this path. And I do want to know more about that path, how she got to where she's at. But I would like you to introduce yourself today.
Great. Yes. Well, as you said, I'm the well-being and mindfulness instructor for the Earl E. Bakke Center for Spirituality and Healing at the University of Minnesota. I often laugh and tell people that's the longest job title I've ever had. But the Bakke
Get that on a business card?
Yeah, the Bakke Center has been around for many, many years. It was founded by our executive director, Dr. Mary Jo Kreitzer, who's a visionary leader in the world of integrative health and well-being. And I can tell you more about what we do, but primarily the niche, the area that I work in is actually the non-academic programs that have to do with community programming that we offer. However, many of those community programs that we offer are attended by university faculty and students and staff. Many of them are, in addition to community members and community organizations as well. I can tell you more about that later. And then we also work with area businesses, helping their employees deal with stress, burnout, enhancing well-being, and especially, I might say, emotional resilience during the past 2+ years. It's been a real rough time for all of us.
Yeah, I imagine it's been quite a bit of a ramp up in the stress levels. But can you tell me how you became to have this as your profession?
Yeah, it is kind of interesting when you sit next to somebody on a plane and they ask you what you do. I guess it's a unique position. And I'm grateful for that. I actually, for many years, I served as an organizational development consultant, working with businesses, organizations, government agencies. And I did a large amount of what we might call public policy facilitation or mediation. I have a mediation background. So much of my work was in that area for many years.
And not at all stressful, right?
Yeah, I sat in the fire, as I used to tell people.
Yeah.
So along with that, a parallel track I had was my own personal practice in mindfulness and in mindfulness meditation. And I had the great gift of studying and practicing with just some wonderful teachers. But that was always just kind of behind the scenes what I did. But clearly, I would say in retrospect, a number of years ago, probably 10, 12 years ago now, I was thinking about, hey, what do you want to do on this next phase, which, you know, the big, maybe last big churn of my professional career, what did I want to do? And I honestly had to assess that the single most important skill beyond all my training and everything else, all my education, was actually my mindfulness training and my ability to sit in the middle of my own personal family, whatever chaos, and with groups and individuals and leaders and be able to maintain as best I could a sense of presence, a sense of kind of being there.
That's fantastic, because I feel like that's an easy thing to lose, you know, in today's world. I mean, in meetings or in even at the home life where sometimes stress creeps in at home, money issues, illnesses, and all these sorts of things. To be able to just slow down and, you know, like the body, to build muscles, you stress out your muscles, but you need that moment where there is no stress for your muscles to build up stronger. And I feel like sometimes the brain doesn't get the break that, you know that we need to give to our muscles.
Oh, that's a great way of putting it. Yeah. It's not as if we're eliminating stress. Stress has its good aspects, by the way. So what we're learning how to do is to manage the inevitable stressors that life will present us in a way. So at any rate, just to finish my story, what I did was I decided to become a mindfulness instructor. I was fortunate enough to train when Jon Kabat-Zinn was still at the University of Massachusetts. I eventually got certified as a mindfulness-based stress reduction instructor through Brown University. And I worked to help with create a mindful leadership program, the Institute for Mindful Leadership, which I worked at for a number of years, and eventually left my consulting practice, and now I'm here at the university where I've actually been as adjunct. I've said I've actually just come home full time. I've been teaching MBSR and helped create the Mindfulness at Work program and some other things as a consultant for a number of years. So I'm here now full time, been here for 3 years, and really happy to be doing this work.
Well, I'm really glad that you're here. So, so what advice do you have for instructors that find themselves stressed out? I mean, it happens every semester. They do have some strategies, I'm sure, themselves already. But what in addition would you say that, you know, a person could, I mean, a basic tool that?
Yeah. You know, as I said earlier, stress is an inevitable part of life, right?
Right.
I don't have a magic wand that takes that away, and no one does.
Mm-hmm.
But what we do have are tools that we all know. Every one of us knows, hey, when I do this, it makes me feel a little bit better, puts things into perspective as me, and can stop that racy, ruminating mind or the anxious mind or whatever else it might be. So my first piece of advice would be to remember what well-being looks like for you and what activates that in your life. That's the first thing I like people to do, is to acknowledge what they already know. You know, through the pandemic, when I've asked this question of groups, almost inevitably comes up nature, walking in nature. How many of us have turned to nature, right? And walking, whatever, being in nature as a healing resource, particularly early on in the pandemic, that was a frequent response, or being with family or friends, or talking it out with a trusted colleague, or, you know, going to bed a little bit earlier, or just all these things that we innately know that we don't even have to be told, here's the right thing to do. You know, honor your own resilience and what you know, and then look at how can I, with some kindness, not another thing on my big long to-do list, but with some kindness, how can I begin to introduce those things I already know, add to my resilience and well-being in my life, spending more time with family in more relaxed ways, maybe, or just whatever it is for you. And then I also think it's really important just to understand that you're not alone in the activation of the stress response. We all get activated very similarly to perceptions of threats. And it has been an incredibly challenging almost 3 years now, right? With the pandemic, we live in our backyard here in Minneapolis is where George Floyd was killed. I mean, you know, now you've got the war going on in Ukraine, and it's really a difficult time. And I think to just acknowledge that and to take a look at the American Psychological Association telling us that, you know, higher rates of anxiety and depression are showing themselves in some cases more than we've seen in a very, very long time in all age groups. Mm-hmm. I just read something today. Someone just sent me an article, a journal article about the second wave of the pandemic is actually now dealing with the repercussions of the mental health issues.
Oh, I'm sure.
So
yeah.
I'm just filled with good news today.
Yeah. Well, I like.
I'm trying to normalize, I guess. Yeah.
With some of your points where you're saying, you know, that it's a very individual thing. What your retreat might be like nature, or for some people, it might be just, you know, being alone or calling their mother or something like that. I like that it's an individual thing. I think that maybe a lot of times we don't schedule in time for our own sanity. What do you think about actually building it into your schedule that I'm going to have to take, 15 minutes just to read a book, or not, I think a lot of times too that we think we're taking breaks, but we're looking through headlines or something instead, and or pouring caffeine on top of it. So
you got it. I'll get to use of technology here in a little bit, or media,
Okay,
whatever.
great.
But for now, I'll just say that I think you're right on with this notion of calendar. When I used to have an exercise when I worked with leaders, that I'd say, open up your calendars, just bring your calendar for the past 2 weeks, just bring it, and they'd bring their they'd all be looking, and we'd say, so you got a lot of really important appointments there, right? Or really critical things you need to do, whatever they are, they're right there.
Yeah.
What about self-care? And I call it self-leadership but we're all leaders of our own lives, right? So, oops, excuse me, sorry. So it's all about that self-leadership. Where does that show up? Where does renewal, self-care, how can you lead anybody else or be of service to anyone else unless your own reservoir is full, right? Or that you're somehow taking care of yourself so that you can be all hands on deck and be resourceful for others. So yeah, my first thing is schedule it. Where does it show up? Where does that time show up? And if it's not there, begin to look at it as an important appointment, just as other appointments are in your life. And then this notion of technology, I'll just say, we often early on, we're in the pandemic, we're suggesting that people look at how often they're going to news feeds, just how often they're just bombarding themselves with those messages. And even just the notifications that come across your screen all the time, how you're pulled away, your attention, and, you can get very hyper activated that way by responding to those notifications. We'd suggest people turn off notifications and maybe just give themselves the gift of checking news twice a day, maybe even once a day. And that doesn't mean that we're not active citizens and that we're not concerned about the world around us. It means that our mental health is also equally important. And we're noticing what happens to our body, minds, and hearts when we're constantly dwelling on that information, right? So we mitigate that somehow. We learn to manage the stress.
I think for a lot of us, it's hard to find that balance of, I want to know what's going on in the world, but it comes in everywhere, in the radio, in the car. Like you said, there's notifications, and you have to be purposefully shut off notifications for a lot of these things. Otherwise, they come up when you install the app or something. So you have to be like, no, I don't want to have that show up all the time. I don't want, Twitter to send me the latest shouting match about Elon Musk or something like that. But to try to find, only so many things. I mean, when there's so much data coming in all the time from like the technology, it just can be overwhelming.
Yeah. I agree. And then I think the other thing is just to understand what happens in the body, the natural stress response that happens. And, that helps us fire up and get things done when we need to, right? Or take care of something, fight or flee, and there's a real threat in our lives or a time pressure and we need to do something. And that's, most of the time stress kind of goes like this. The central nervous system has an ability to rise to the occasion, and then it needs to rejuvenate in order to get that resilience back in place, right? So, it kind of goes up and down, and it's got its good aspects. I always tell people, you wouldn't be listening to me and I wouldn't be speaking right now had our ancestors not been hardwired, to perceive a threat and then respond to it accordingly, right? So that's a pretty cool thing.
That's a very good point.
Yeah. However, when we get stuck in higher, constant, elevated states of stress, that's where burnout happens. Where it really begins to affect our mental health, our physical health and well-being. We all know that. And so then you just have to think about, how do I care for myself now? What are the things that I can do that are actually adaptive and well, will really help me out versus maladaptive. The maladaptive are those things like drinking, all the too muches, right?
Sure.
Too much Netflix, too much cigarette smoking, too much drinking, or cigarette smoking, period, I should say.
Mm-hmm.
All the over stuff that we do, overwork, over this, over that, which just drains the body and never lets that restorative quality to happen. And of course, we all do that. And life requires that we forge ahead sometimes, but really taking a look at what am I doing that's adding to that, including use of media as an example that you just said, our diet, our sleep patterns, all those other things. And to that end, if you can, I'll just share something with you here right now on the screen. At the center, we have an incredibly robust and very well utilized website. And it's takingcharge.csh.umn.edu. You can see it at the top of the screen there. Yep. But we have a whole well-being model. It's a 6-dimensional well-being model where you can take a self-assessment here. It doesn't take very long at all. And then depending upon your responses, it'll direct you to different pages. We've got tons of information about mindfulness. We have free programming every Monday, for example, since day one almost of our, the pandemic. We offered something called Mindful Mondays. It's a noon hour session where we, as a community, come together and practice mindful movement and mindful meditation. And now we have upwards of 500 people joining us every Monday. Yeah, it's pretty cool. And it's part of the center's commitment to say that we want to do whatever we can to help mitigate the impacts of high stress levels that so many of us are experiencing, and creating a safe place for people to come as community and practice together. And we're also are offering just a full array of well-being and mindfulness programs at reduced or pay what you can fees, again, for faculty and students and administrative people here at the university to really enhance their well-being, as well as community members. So I just want to show you this as a way to say, here's where you can go for more information.
Very good. Would you say that you have any rules of thumb of how much self-leadership or care that you should have, kind of a on a work day? You should really, go for a walk or get away and read a book or whatever your stress reduction is. Is there a rule of thumb that how much you should do per work day, and then on the weekends, instead of, you might have a side hustle besides, but what really what's the rule of thumb is what should you do, give yourself, what should you schedule?
Well, the first thing I like to do is to tell people to throw all the shoulds and coulds out the door.
Okay.
The second you do that, overstressed people like ourselves will create a to-do list on it, and then they'll stress out over that. Yep. So I'd let that one go. There's some really interesting work it's actually in the field of leadership about change, leaders doing behavioral change. And they say the most important ingredient is actually a clear vision about what you aspire to. That vision, which is positive and aspirational, and letting that direct your attention. So then based on that affirmative vision of what you're looking for, then figure out how you carve that out in your day. Now, there are some basics, like 8 hours of sleep. That's proven to be pretty dang effective and pretty dang important. And when we don't get those basic elements of well-being, we can get ourselves in trouble. The same is true of, those 18 cups of coffee. Maybe I'm exaggerating a little here, but, all that caffeine consumption, probably not so good. It just adds to stress, right? So diet, sleep, exercise, getting what you can. But that doesn't mean I'm going to be a marathon runner tomorrow when I hardly have been walking around the block now, right? So we also set things that are kind and generous to yourself. There might be an edge to it, but you're also kind and generous. And so you're setting up goals that are realistic for yourself and that really affirm that vision or that aspiration that you're looking for. So there's those basic things that I think are important. And maybe some of those you could consider on your pretty important essential list, right? And then there are other things like that's where your personal lifestyle, your family situation, your circumstances come in terms of, for me, my family, my friends, my social network, my professional career. These are the things that I prefer to do that really bring about a sense of balance and perspective and well-being. And I will just say that there are some simple tools that we teach at the center.
Sure.
One is called STOP. And we used to just call it STOP. Since the pandemic hit us, I've been calling it a compassionate stop break. I changed the title.
Okay.
And it's using the acronym STOP, meaning the S stands for slow down,
Mm-hmm.
And in that slowing down, the T stands for taking a breath or two. We know that the breath is an incredibly resourceful tool for us in terms of stress regulation. And that by moderating and using the breath, maybe taking deeper, fuller, real nourishing, satisfying in-breaths and out-breaths, we can activate the relaxation response in the body. And especially when we're taking the out-breaths, if we can make them a little longer than the in-breaths, and maybe just a few breaths that way, it can be really helpful. So that's the T. The O stands for observe. And I like to say observe with some compassion how challenging this human condition of ours can sometimes be, right? We're all in this one together. Yeah. Life is challenging and difficult sometimes. So maybe offering yourself some kind words. We tend to extend those out to others pretty freely, but rarely to ourselves. A lot of us have that kind of inner right?
Right.
So we can remind ourselves of that, maybe smile at it and offer ourselves some nurturing, kind words. And then the P stands for proceed, or maybe new perspective. Maybe just in those couple of minutes, those mindful moments of collecting ourselves, of creating a pause, just a mindful pause for a minute or two, maybe even. You probably recall that yourself when you notice that you're really agitated, rather than, feeding that even for a moment to stop and just say, oh yeah, I'm a human being. And this is kind of a challenging thing happening to me right now. So maybe I can provide some self-leadership, right?
Yeah.
And come home to this inner capability I have to help myself out here a little bit. But it's so easy to run because the body is so hardwired to run to that stress reactivity that to learn how to engage that other aspect of the central nervous system known as the parasympathetic, so it takes a little bit of mindfulness in there to bring it home.
Sure. That's all really good stuff. It seems like we should know that. It seems like we should be able to access that all the time, but somehow we tend to ignore it. I'm especially interested in breathing and the power of that. I find that actually over the pandemic, I've discovered a guy named Wim Hof. I don't know if you know the name. But one of his things he really talks about is breathing exercises and how it helps you relax. It helps, your digestive system. It helps your mind, and actually helps inflammation. Yes. He did this experiment where actually he defied endotoxins injected to his body by breathing. So I think it's a very powerful thing in that aspect for relaxation. But also if I need to focus, for a moment here, I feel like I'm about to public speak or something like that. If I can just think about my breath for a little bit, it brings me back to me instead of my mind going all over the place. So.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. Breathing practices have been around for centuries, from yogic traditions. And I'm sure there was some reference to that probably in the work that you're describing. And
yep.
And many, many other practices, talk about the importance of breath and working with it. It's interesting in mindfulness meditation, we actually don't talk about controlling the breath, other than sometimes when people are settling in, I'll encourage, for example, a deeper in-breath and out-breath, allowing the body just to relax a little bit. And then we're just with the natural rhythmic quality of the breath. And when we're able to just kind of observe this body that knows just how to breathe, and we can enter into a state where we're actually working and engaging the parasympathetic nervous system. And that's not to avoid or suppress or deny or push away the inevitability of life's difficulties, but I always like to say, to actually be with them with more capacity and resourcefulness. And that's what engaging mindfulness can do, and also bringing along qualities such as kindness and compassion and gratitude and things like that, that we oftentimes talk about as mindfulness practices as well.
Very good. So we have that website that you shared with us to help kind of self-assess, and then there's the stop you told us about, and then your Mindful Mondays. What other things are on campus or nearby that do you think people could use as tools to help?
We offer a number of academic classes as well as non-academic classes in mindfulness, and a full array of well-being classes as well. And then we have a free webinar series that I don't think people know enough about. And we bring in national speakers often to talk about aspects of social justice and well-being, environmental issues and well-being, so global social issues, as well as personal and community health and well-being. So I really encourage, they're often over the noon hour and times like that faculty and staff at the university could really engage with, and many people report how helpful that is. And I think just coming together in community like that, like when the pandemic started, I think there were many of us who thought, an online community, what are you talking about? You know, community is formed when people come together in the same space. Well, I think we've proven to a certain extent, that we can create a sense of community and support by joining together in our learning and growing. And most of us, you know, it is really easy to jump into that stress reactivity, and it's really easy to forget to take a couple of breaths. So reminding ourselves by learning and growing together in classes and free webinars, you know, using tools, I think can be especially helpful. Just that supportive nature of a group experience. And of course, we offer many of those through the center.
Well, I'm more relaxed just talking to you, Mariann. You have a very soothing voice. And thank you very much for sharing your experiences with us and your expertise.
Yeah, great.
And I don't know, is there anything else that you have to share, or that's pretty much it?
Yeah. I would just say, go to our website. There's far more resources for you there. Not only the Taking Charge, but we also have another website that has academic courses and some programming things for the community and others, that is csh.umn. So, you know, just the regular website would also be helpful too.
And I'll just mention that I also noticed that you have a couple videos on YouTube. That was, I kind of YouTubed you to see what you had, and there's some breathing exercises that you do, and then like a stretching thing.
Yeah. Those are probably segments from our Mindful Mondays series. Okay. Yeah, I'm guessing that's what that is. But yeah, so there are some videos. There's also some free guided meditations that if you go to the Taking Charge website, I think, and just put in guided meditations, you can also access some free guided meditations, which might be really helpful. Many of them shorter, different durations of length. So those should be helpful to you as well. And they're in many different voices. So that's kind of nice too.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much.
Oh, yeah. Great to meet you, Evan. And congratulations on your podcast, and keep going with it.
Well, thank you very much. So that's it for today. And thank you for joining us. And we'll catch you next time.